Fantastic. So I'm absolutely delighted for the second episode of Career 7 Live to have two people whose career I've admired for a long time. And so I am personally very excited to hear John Murphy, tax partner in PwC, and Deirdre Lyons, entrepreneur with the Examfly, which provides online support tools for people preparing for professional exams such as tax and accounting. To hear your insights, given that you've both started off in the same place, i.e. a training contract in an accountancy firm, and you've both made career choices that have gone very different paths. So I think there's going to be plenty of people who'd love to hear just how your choices compare, contrast. So with that in mind, I'm very excited to kick off. And really, I suppose the first question, and we'll kick off with Dee, with you on this. In terms of when you've made career choices, like from both starting there in your training contract to industry, to working in a startup, to now running your own startup, what kind of self-reflection have you done, Dee, that you feel has really helped you make good career choices?
I guess like when you're at the start of your career, you can, you tend to be on a path, it's the decisions maybe aren't so strategic, or they weren't for me anyway. After leaving cert, I studied law and French, and getting a training contract in one of the firms seemed like a natural choice after that. I suppose it's only once you hit your 20s that you start to know yourself a bit better. And I suppose that knowledge doesn't occur in a vacuum. You've gotten a taste of different types of work. You've kind of seen, beyond what's portrayed in TV or on brochures, like what a working life is kind of like. You know yourself a bit better. So like, I suppose for me, after PwC, I was in Davy for 3.5 years, and there I got to do a lot more stuff in the nature of in-house innovation, and kind of got to see that I liked that kind of thing, like having ideas, being able to put them into practice, and that was something appealing about the entrepreneurial journey. But really, like, it didn't come until, a bit later. Probably wouldn't have been possible for me to make those choices back in my earlier 20s, or certainly not as a teenager. So like, before you have the self-awareness maybe to kind of know what you like, or what you particularly enjoy doing, I think it's a good idea, just whatever you do, give it a good go. Try to get involved in as many different projects and things as possible, so you can kind of see what you like and don't like. And any job you're doing, if you give it a good go, that gives you options, so at the point before your self-awareness kind of kicks in fully, that would be my best advice. Just give everything a good shot.
I love it, Dee. And to John, to yourself, John, I guess, in terms of that piece that Dee mentioned around self-awareness, how important has self-awareness been at the different points and the different choices that you've made from starting day one in the accountancy firm to where you are now as partner in the firm?
It's very important, John. I think, as Deirdre said, you change as a person, so your self-awareness grows and evolves over time as well. Like, I'm very different now than I was as a trainee, but I suppose one of the things that probably hasn't changed is I'm not a very knee-jerk reaction person, so I tend to try and think about the decisions I'm making before I actually make a move. That's not to say I'm not a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan person either. I've played the hand that's been dealt in front of me at different times, but I always do try and think a little bit about what I'm going to do. And self-reflection can be, it's partly going through stuff in your own head, but also it's partly working with, like, say, my family are very important to me. I chat through stuff with my wife before I do things. My parents earlier in my career would have been a great source of guidance for me, and then mentors and coaches as well. External coaches, mentors inside the firm. I use any resource I can to get a different perspective. So some of it comes from yourself and your own understanding of yourself, and some of it comes from getting that type of input from people you trust and people whose opinion you value.
Totally, John. And maybe Dee, to bounce this one off you, John's mentioned the whole idea of mentors and getting good input. Like, for people here who are considering making choices, how do you know who's a good person to look for mentorship or advice off the way John has described?
Yeah, I suppose you could probably separate the type of advice you might be looking for into something that requires some kind of domain specific knowledge. So for me in the startup world, if I talk to someone who's raised a seed round or a Series A before, they're going to have knowledge that I don't have. And, so you can kind of see people out on that basis. And then maybe more kind of general wisdom, when there isn't, when it's something a bit more abstract that you're trying to decide on. I suppose, first of all, like, don't be afraid to ask. Like, you'll probably see people that you tend to admire in, your working life. And my experience has been in PwC and in Davy and in the startup ecosystem that people are only too happy to give something back and to give their advice. So like often it's more that people don't ask rather than that people aren't, generous with their thoughts and advice. Then again, and this is maybe something going older, like, no one person is the guru that knows everything. So it's, I suppose the thing that you should always maybe try to do is look at the assumptions that are underpinning that advice, because everyone, including yourself, is coming with their own set of biases. The things that they prioritize in life might not be the same things that you place the same value on. So just kind of taking ideas or advice from a lot of different people and then filtering it through your own judgments and your own value system. No one's going to have all the answers for you, and nor should they. And I suppose developing your own kind of critical thinking skills, and then kind of looking back, after every year that's gone by and kind of trying to be honest with yourself. Well, did that decision work out in the way that I thought it would? And what were the factors in that? Or were some of my assumptions flawed? And that's probably the best you can do. But yeah, reach out, because there's a lot of good people that are willing to help, I think.
Okay. So it sounds like you've mentioned this asking, like, be willing and courageous enough to ask for help. John, I guess just to Dee's point, in your career around choices, how have you found asking people for help around making the choice? Like some people, including myself, don't necessarily, and Dee mentioned that don't necessarily find it easy from time to time. I hold my hand up, I'm one of them. To what extent have you found it easy or challenging, and how helpful has it been when you've asked the question?
John, I think we're going to have to delve into some of your thoughts now. For a man that I've asked questions of in the past, I'm disappointed to find out that you're reluctant to ask for help yourself.
I'll stay on after for anyone who's interested.
Good man. I suppose, I have a little bit of what Deirdre said there. I'm a sort of quiet person. This wouldn't be the normal thing that I do in terms of webcasts and stuff. So I'd keep my cards close to my own chest. But I think what I've found is I'm trying to get a balance when I look for input from people that are on the same wavelength as me, that, they'll say, you're fairly bang on there, and people that are on completely different wavelengths. Because there are other partners in PwC and in the tax practice that would come at things very different than me, but their perspective is no less valid. And often I try and get a sense from them of, why would they go at something? How would they go at something? Why would they go at it in that way? And that's been very helpful to me in my later career, because you're in leadership roles or you're doing different forms of business development. You have a certain style, but getting perspectives from other people around why they would take up a role, how they would approach that role. You listen to them, you take certain pieces, you incorporate it into your own style or the way you're going to approach something, and there's certain pieces that you say, no, not for me, was interesting, but I'm not going to take that on board. So I think it's just a mixture of people you trust on the same wavelength as you, and then people that you still, as we said earlier, people you admire, that you think they're successful at what they do. They might go at things in a different way from me, but I still would like to get their input or get their sense of how to approach something.
A recurring theme for both of you is there's a definite openness in terms of what people have to say, and I think it's then you filtering it back to yourselves. Then, just for those who have joined, what I should have said at the start as well is that as I'll chat till the cows come home and ask questions till the cows come home. I'd love you though to ask any questions that you like, and you can do it two ways really. There's a function down the bottom right that allows you to raise your hand. I'll see that straight away and invite you to ask the question yourself. Just the only thing I'd say is just to be comfortable that you'll be included in the recording that way. The second option, if it's more preferable, is you can just write it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat down the bottom here. And if there's a question there, I'll happily pose it to Dee and John. One of the reasons why I've admired both of your careers is because I feel that you've done a great job of making choices for yourselves when perhaps conventional wisdom may have said that you should go a different route. So what do I mean is, like, conventional wisdom sometimes says that as soon as you finish your training contract in a professional service firm, you should start to look to leave. And I guess, John, you would probably be seeing that a lot of your peer group may have made that choice. And again, it's just what we know to be the more commonly worn path, yet you didn't, John. You went to industry, and the commonly kind of post sort of professional service path is you go to industry and you try and progress in that environment, and you chose, I'm not saying that either of them are exclusive to yourselves routes, but certainly that the road less traveled both times. So my question, and I guess I'll go to Dee first, is how do you manage to put aside like that conventional path, almost like what society or what the norm is telling you is the thing you should do? How do you manage to protect yourself from that thinking and just make the choice that you feel is right? Because I'm sure there's lots of people here who feel that type of influence.
Yeah, I suppose with that question, for me, like, it kind of feels like the startup journey, it's too soon to tell, you know, if it proves to be the right decision in a conventional sense. Like, all I know that it's right for me now, you know, I had an idea, I wanted to try it, there's been a certain level of validation. So I suppose what helped me maybe arrive at that decision, like just the realization that the end goal is happiness, and that's a very personal definition. So if I was kind of looking at my career, I'd had 10 years probably between PwC and Davy, and really enjoyed them, you know, and had really great experiences, learned a lot. There was no push factors, but I did find I particularly enjoyed, you know, having ideas and trying to put them into practice. And probably when self-awareness developed, I knew that I could kind of cope with a certain level of uncertainty, which is, you know, by definition kind of baked into the startup experience. So if the end goal is happiness rather than, you know, whatever the conventional definition of success or the regular path is, then, you know, that just kind of made it an easier decision. Now, I would say as well that, like, you know, just because something is, the grass, you know, can sometimes be greener in one place or another, like certainly in the startup world with all its ups and downs and uncertainty, there are things about like regular jobs, you know, of the type I had in PwC and Davy that I can certainly see benefits of that I didn't before. So I do think it probably goes back to self-awareness, knowing yourself, and then maybe capping the downside risk if you are doing something that, you know, maybe is a bit less common. So for me, I suppose it was good peace of mind that I had 10 years in those firms behind me. I had a certain skill set that I knew would probably always be valuable no matter what I did, and could kind of see that the trend in professional firms is moving towards, you know, better knowledge of technology, data, analytics and stuff, so that I could learn things in the startup world that could stand to me one way or the other. So yeah, if I had to sum it up in 2 points, like one, the end goal is happiness, and just to find that in a way that's personal to you, and sometimes that takes time to figure out. And then secondly, if you can, like, cap the downside risk, you know, look at your fallback position. I'm probably talking more about anyone thinking about startups, because, like, you know, statistically, the reality is that, you know, most of them don't survive longer than 3 or 5 years. So, you know, it's only kind of sensible to kind of see what, you know, fallback positions are there for you. Even though that you'll go into it with the best will in the world and expecting to do well, but, you know, it just kind of gives peace of mind if you are doing something a bit more unusual.
Brilliant. So what I'd like, I've seen a great question there come in about what's been your greatest motivation to succeed along your journey so far, and I'm going to ask you just to ponder on that for a moment, because John, I suppose I'd like to just to get your sense on that, because, you know, Dee's talked about maybe it's this whole idea of like happiness, and this, you know, this the personal definition of happiness, and making sure you're achieving that, and also the fact that you've got that sort of managed downside through the great experience that Dee has. For you, John, a lot of your peers would have started to move off out of the professional services kind of world. could have put pressure on you maybe to think I should be doing something similar. How did you manage to sort of protect yourself and your thinking to allow yourself to make a choice that you've made?
Yeah, I think, John, it probably ties in a little bit with some of the earlier points around what's important to you at a particular point in time. So I was planning to move home. So I'm from just outside Portlaoise, and I wanted to move home and work closer to home. So I had a view of life at the time that having tax qualification and the accounting qualification would help that. So I said, right, lateral move in PwC will help. Let's get some tax experience, get the tax exams, and see where we go from there. And I suppose then that has just evolved over time for me. I like the culture in PwC. I like the people. I like the way we work with clients. And I suppose the conventional definition of how you work in PwC evolved as my thoughts around what I wanted to do evolved. And we've more people commuting. We've definitely more people remote working in the last few weeks than we ever had before. So what you can achieve within the firm shifted as what I wanted moved as well. So I've been able to balance living in Portlaoise or outside Portlaoise, commuting to Dublin, working from home, working with an international client base where clients don't really mind where you are, as long as you're contactable and you're giving them good advice. The working world has evolved with me, so that's allowed me to be able to achieve what I want. Now, I never thought of it the way you've described it in terms of what my peers were doing, or I suppose I felt at the time I was making a different change by going to tax. It just wasn't as big a change as they were making, and probably to Deirdre's point around risk, that suited me at the time. I had an appetite for some risk, but not that much. So it was a hedge your bets and a bit of a plan behind it. And that's sort of the way I've been working for a while.
Okay. What I like from both is there's definitely this kind of personal sense of sense of happiness. So like, you know, you mentioned it, and John, through working, through wanting to move back home, like that you were thinking about the bigger picture. So I can see you've both really kind of just checked in on what matters to you and made choices around that. To come back to that question, so I guess thank you, David, for the question. So what is, like, and I, you know, we know each other well, and I've watched over you over the last few years, and the determination, the energy that you've brought to both working in the startup before you set up your own, and now how you've made, you know, such successful steps in the last 6-12 months. So what's driving you?
I'd probably caveat by saying that motivation can kind of change over time, as can your definition of success, you know. So John kind of touched on there that, you know, when he finished his training contract, you know, certain things were important to him, and that was baked into his definition of success. At the moment, probably in a work sense, I do get a real kick out of putting ideas into practice, like seeing where a process could be improved or a way of doing things could be better to benefit people, and just trying to get that idea realized in some shape or form, and then seeing if I was right about it. Like, you know, was it actually a better way? So, you know, probably before I, you know, had my own startup, that was expressed in different ways, like creative writing and other kind of creative pursuits and stuff, but it can be done in a business sense as well. So at the moment, like, the big kick in the startup is, yeah, just kind of looking at something that's been done a certain way for years, trying to rethink it from scratch, and using kind of limited resources, trying to do it in a different way and seeing if your assumptions hold up. And thankfully, you know, we've had a lot of encouraging signs in the last 6-12 months in the startup situation. Things are always uncertain, so who knows how it will go, but it is a really nice feeling to see that you've created something and put it into the world, for better or worse. And I'm in the lucky position that I've had a chance to do that with our first bit of investment, our first couple of sales. Yeah, I just hope to kind of keep doing that. Yeah.
Fantastic, Dee. So I there's people here who'd be making choices at varying stages of their career. I'm just, in terms of early choices, I wonder if you were back at like 21. John, you're smiling there. To you first, John, what advice would you, if you were chatting to your 21-year-old self, and he asked you the question, come here, what around career choices, what, like, you being where you are now, tell me what I need to know. What would you tell me?
It's a long time ago, John. I won't tell you how long ago it is, but it's a long time ago. I think good choices, I think some of the bedrock of good choices, whether you're 21, my age, there's commonalities. I think it's about having good information. For me, it's about having good information. It's about having some time to process that information and work through what it means for me. And then I think there's a bit of an overlap with what Deirdre has been speaking about earlier. It's about your appetite for risk, and it's about understanding the upside and is it worth it. So, for example, I was asked to go on as a comment to the US for 6 months, mid-20s, sort of in around manager grade, just married. Wife couldn't go to the US with me. We were going to be apart for a good chunk of 5-6 months. And we had a good conversation on what it meant for my career, how it could help, where she was going in her career. And we said, right, go for it, do it. She traveled over and back. She was over with me for a month. Time went quickly, great life experience, great work experience. But it was about getting the information, thinking it through, understanding what the risks or challenges were. Was it the upside worth it? And just going for it then. So that's what works for me. And I think it can work for you at whatever age you are in your career.
And before I come to you, Dee, to ask you the same question, just to check in on one thing, John, because I think it could be important for those people who are at, say, making early stage choices. Good information. What does that look like for the person who's making an early stage career choice?
I think good information for me, anyway, is what's involved in the role. Yep. I think to Deirdre's point, what's going to motivate you, what's going to give you happiness, what's going to challenge you. And then where do you go from there? What's the next move after that? So it's not, there's a bit of, right, you're in that role, to do that role and do your best in it, but where's it going to lead you to? Okay. So that is what good information looks like for me.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you, John. Dee, so you have an opportunity to chat to your 21-year-old self. What advice are you going to give to her around the career choices that she's going to make?
Yeah, I suppose John's point is a good one about information. I guess when I was that age, I didn't really know people in my family or otherwise that were in these kind of professional worlds or in the startup world. I suppose my parents were of that generation that, the main thing was to try and get a good education and get a good job. So, and that's one side of the picture, but it's kind of incomplete. So I guess what I would maybe tell myself is, or anyone at 21, is that it's like a marathon, not a sprint. Like, don't try to feel that your whole life rests on any one decision that you make at 21. Some people that say didn't get the training contracts or, had disappointments in their early 20s, still shut up day after day and got to really good places as they defined it, eventually. So it's never going to be down to one decision or, even 1 year. I think whatever you end up doing, if you try and give it a really good go, then that just gives you options and skills. And if you can reflect and see how you can apply them to different scenarios. Probably now that I'm doing something that would be perceived and probably is in reality like a bit more risky, like I am very happy that although it wasn't a very strategic decision at the time, that I went to PwC first and got a training contract and got experience in tax and in financial planning, wealth management in Davy. It just does feel like a decent position to be in. Although, as I say, at 21, it's hard to know how strategic. You can't. You don't know what the future is going to be. So, yeah, don't beat yourself up too much. But whatever decision you do make and whatever position you go into, just try and learn as much as possible. Give it a good go. Talk to the people that you admire. And yeah, it starts to reflect on, well, what is it really that I like or like a bit less about the position that I'm in now.
Brilliant. And I love you said this at the start and just now, Dee, about just making a good go of what you're doing. And we might just come back even just to say, what have you got from the training contract and the Davy experience, and how has it served you? And I'll allow you to reflect on that, as I just asked John. For those who are in the midst of something, like sometimes I find in the 4 years into my own business, there's frustrations with like not seeing it move as quick as you want, etc. And there might be people here, wherever they are in their career, might be feeling the same type of frustration about maybe it not being where they want it to be. Or my question is, how do you manage those feelings? Like, how do you manage those frustrations so that you don't go off and make a knee-jerk, you mentioned knee-jerk, John, that you don't make a knee-jerk choice unnecessarily, and perhaps a wrong choice?
Yeah, and I'd sorry to, you think we were scripted now, but I'm going back to Deirdre's previous point. If you can look at yourself and say you've done your best, you had a plan, you had a process, you've executed to the best of your ability. To some extent, how it plays out after that is out of your hands. Because if you look at a lot of businesses at the moment, the business owners have had great business plans, they've executed properly, and something in the macro environment has just happened and they've had no control over it. And how do they handle that? I'm supposing that they're trying to take a bit of comfort from, they've had their plan, they've executed, something's come off for them or not come off for them, and that's how they're managing. So that's what I try and do with my work. Like, you're trying to grow your business, trying to manage your business, grow your team, look after your people. Some of it comes off, some of it doesn't. But if you've come at it as best you can in terms of having a process, having a plan, and executing on it, then you have a certain amount of peace at the end of it, or contentment is the wrong word, but you try and manage the frustration that way. So that's the approach I take, and that's what I've seen work pretty well for other people as well.
Okay, that phrase of creating a process and sticking with it is it's a brilliant. We've seen it work really well in the last years in business and sports, so it makes total sense, John. Thank you. Deirdre, and I guess last word, just we'll finish up at 3:30 on the dot, and John, I know you have to go at 3, so please do just so just in 60 seconds, there may have been times in your, particularly the latter part of the career, or the entrepreneurial stage of the career, where frustrations may have come. Let's say, how do you manage them to stay true to the choice?
In a startup sense.
Yeah,
I suppose just focus on the bigger picture. Like for me, it startup, it kind of goes by stages. You start with an idea, and then you're kind of trying to validate the market for it. And the last thing you want to be doing is flogging a dead horse. If it's not a kind of a good idea, then like it's best that you find that out as quickly as possible. So like for me, I kind of thought that I'd give it like 6 months, and 6 months to 9 months, and if at the end of that I hadn't got either sales or investments, then that was people who are unconnected to me telling me that maybe it's not such a good idea. And thankfully by the end of the 9 months I had both. But yeah, just kind of maybe just setting aside times where you can indulge all your frustrations and doubts. So maybe once every 2 months I'll like think about all the kind of uncertainties and that are embedded in any kind of startup journey, but you try and put those to the back of your mind day to day when you're actually trying to get stuff done in the world. So maybe carving out time that you can indulge your frustrations and doubts and actually analyze, well, am I on track for doing what I want to do, or am I just fooling myself? So yeah, setting aside a dedicated time to think about those things.
Brilliant. Thank you, Deanna. Okay, so in the interest of time, John Murphy and Deirdre Lyons, I just want to say a huge thank you to you both for giving us your time, for your honesty, and for your advice. There is a huge amount of practical learning that we can all take away. So massive thanks, John and Dee. Really appreciate the time.